let's talk to Rich in New York, who I think wants to carry on this bear question a little bit. And, here we are on the internet. Let's do the internet thing. Rich, what you got for us?
Hey, first of all, I think being a vampire is probably the coolest thing ever. So if you really want, you got it made. But that's just a joke. Really, the question about the bear thing, it seems like people don't understand that when people react at such large numbers to a survey question, you have to ask the question of, is the question a good question? But what is in our society that would trigger women reacting to it? Mm-hmm. And yes. It seems like that's always lost in some of these things. Well, I'm not going to do that. I've never. Why are women feeling that way? I'm not a bear. I can't rip them apart with my claws. All these type of reactions to the points that both of you made is that the dangers that women feel every single day is what this is talking about. It's not talking about the bear. And I don't understand. People seem to miss that point. It goes over their head.
Yeah, I think Sydney did a great job of highlighting the fact that in some ways, even though a bear is a inscrutable wild animal, and we're not necessarily able to get inside their psychology in the same way we could a man, their motivations are still much more of a known quantity, and their behavior is therefore much more predictable. And you're unlikely to see, 98% of all bears would never assault a woman. It becomes like way less of a consideration in some ways.
Right. I have never once seen a mugshot of a bear being passed around the neighborhood as an offender who's moved in, next door or anything like that. Mm-hmm. Never say never, but so far.
Another thing was, when was the last time you saw a bear just target women?
Yeah.
Great point.
Yeah,
when a bear is rogue or something, a bear is rogue and he just wants to eat whatever. He feels threatened, or he's been trained or taught that humans taste good or whatever. He's just going for humans. I mean, he's never just looked at women and just targeted them. I just think people just seem to miss so many of these things that seem to be so simple. Well, I think it's based on who you are and what you see.
No, and you're hitting on the meat of it, just with that central question, suggesting that this is a question that needs to be asked, because it's not as if we are taking survey results so that our park rangers can go out and make determinations on who is and is not allowed to wander through the national parklands. It's about recognizing that there's a huge emotional reaction to the notion of men in our culture. And why is that reaction there? Well, we have hundreds of years of incredible academic literature, of culture and music and art and philosophy and dialogue to sift through. I'm not going to pretend to be able to sum up all of gender theory here, but this question does serve an interesting razor to kind of cut through all of that and just highlight the simple fact that women are scared of men. And that is a problem, full stop. I don't really give a shit about the safety metrics of bear encounters. I will say, not for nothing, but I actually told this story in my wedding vows, how proud and impressed I was when I met my wife to see that she was somebody who, when we encountered bears on the trail, had no problem just sort of looking around, making sure it was a safe situation, and then just powering forward in a way that I know is very different from the way she walks into a convenience store when she is alone late at night.
Right. 100%.
And to your point, I think as men, we can empathize as much as we want, but we can't understand that. I remember, and I'm almost embarrassed by this. When it was a while ago, a long time ago. I was on a line, and a woman cut me off on the line in the grocery store, right? And I looked at her, and I just scowled at her for 10 seconds, just looking at her because I was so pissed, right?
Sure.
And I watched the reaction, and her head dropped, and I didn't think anything. And I got in my car and I realized what I did not have to do that. But as a young man reacting, not reacting to her as a woman, just reacting to her as a person cutting me off in that line. This power dynamic, and it hurt me so deeply. I wish I wanted to go back in there to try to just say I'm sorry, but I knew that it wasn't the thing to do. But we don't understand as men, and everything that we do, we need to question. And just some of the, I just don't think, and I just don't think we do the time. It's just like as a black man, I think it's the same thing with, people who don't understand our reactions. And I think for me as a black man, I've decided that, and years ago I had to decide that civil rights isn't black rights. It had to be civil rights for everybody. And I don't think we all take that time to do these things. We don't take our times to self-examine our reactions that we think are benign. And I think if we do this if we try to do this from just about every aspect of our life, we're better off. And I don't think many of us do that. We make that move and we learn that thing.
Yeah.
Men need to recognize their privilege here. They need to recognize that their experience is different from most women's experiences. Sydney, please.
Well, yeah. And I was just going to say, also, I think there's the added confusion on my end of most of the responses we're seeing that have a problem with this conversation are responding with aggression. And you're like, why would you use... Right, like, why would you use, even if it's just goofy social media aggression? I know that as a woman, we take all kinds of aggression as aggression. It doesn't matter if it's passive aggression. It doesn't, like, you've got to be careful because passive aggression can turn to real aggression very quickly. So you might think it's a funny TikTok that you're making, like sassing a woman who made a video about that, but it can also come across as very aggressive. And it's confusing to me how, in order to prove that that women should not be afraid of them, they respond aggressively. The men who I'm not afraid of really haven't had much of a take on the situation. Their take has been, wow, that's tough, or weird, how many people are upset about this or offended by this, or I didn't even know that topic was going around. Like my dad has no idea this topic is going around. But the people you don't have to worry about in those scenarios, the people who I would not trade for the bear, right, are not the people responding with aggression. It's the people who, for whatever reason, they hear this conversation and they take it offensively and they take it personally. And to that I say, what is the connection you're drawing between yourself and this woman saying she's afraid, and why did you draw that conclusion, and why did you feel offended by that? If a news story went out about a woman robbing a bank nearby, my first thought would not be, oh my God, they're going to think it's me. They're going to think it's me just because they said a woman. So why is it that so many men are taking this commentary and thinking this is about me? And that, I think, deserves much further introspection.
Yeah, no, I'm loving that even among our community, in our chat right now, there are men feeling like this is a conversation bashing men and talking about how like bears are these apex predators, ignoring the fact that men, like human men, are the dominant force on the planet, right? Like, if you feel like this conversation is bashing men, you're either missing this conversation or perhaps you're one of the men being bashed, and you should examine that. Yes. Is that, am I too much? Well,
and there's a comment here that I actually would love to address in the chat. Puck asked, is there a way to respond with curiosity in such a way that could not be interpreted as aggression? Yes, there is. I think there's a huge difference between I'm stitching this TikTok because this dumb lady says this dumb thing. And girl, if you're afraid of it, there's so many like sarcastic and hot takes and like, what's the problem, ladies? Like, you've never been with a real man. Those are all the wrong response. The correct response would be, I'm curious. What's your take? What's your reasoning? What do you think she's talking about? Ladies in the audience, anybody who's ever experienced this, comment below and tell me why this would be such a thing. I'm very confused. There's a much different way to ask questions and get an answer than being like, why, huh? What's your problem? What's wrong with you? Why, huh? Like, are you just dumb? Are you a nerd? Are you ugly? Like, are you just miserable in your marriage or whatever? Genuinely asking a question, I don't think is ever a problem. In fact, I think it would be well received, but it's any phrase at all done in a specific tone or with a certain body language can be taken as aggressive or passive aggressive. And I think there is a huge difference, and most people can tell the difference between somebody who genuinely wants to know versus somebody who wants to start an argument or wants to debate. So yeah, always ask when you're curious. I think that's the best way to learn.
Yeah, it's a tough question, and in the end, when you are in a position of power, like men, when you are questioned, why is it a threat to your power? Why is it a threat to you?
Right.
Is it that you realize that, and honestly, as a black man, I see the same reactions when it comes to race. These reactions are pretty consistent across the board on everything. It's like the predominant position feels like something's being taken away from them. Whereas the reality is they have been taking things away so long. When people start telling them to stop taking things away, they get offended.
Yes. And you also said something.
And the reality is they've been the one that's, go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
But I'm just saying, in the end, when you are in a position of preeminence, when people question you, no one's taking anything away. You have to question yourself, what have I been taking away from them for so long that they're questioning me? And this is what people don't get it. And I see it, like I said, and for me, especially in race relations, I see it because that's the thing that affects me the most. But I also see it in all types of communities, and it seems like these are the things that people seem to be missing, and I don't get it. And even within the black community, I call people on it when I see the misogyny and stuff. So it's any ism.
Yeah. Well, and you said something that I just kind of thought about a minute ago that I think is also really important to this conversation. A moment ago, when you were talking about that memory you have and how bad it makes you feel and how sad it makes you feel and how uncomfortable, I think there's a certain demographic of people who handle the discomfort in the wrong way. So you remember that and you think, oh, I should have handled that better. I regret that behavior. I'm going to be different in the future. And that's awesome. And that means I think that you've got a really high emotional intelligence. You've done a lot of introspection. You've done a lot of work on yourself. You've admitted when you change as an adult, as you grow up. You've probably gone through phases, it sounds like, as you've gotten older. And I think there's another group of people among us that's sadly a large part of the population that when they have a memory where they feel bad, they don't know how to process those feelings. So they immediately go, no, the other person was wrong. No, that lady shouldn't have been scared. She's the problem. I'm not the problem. I didn't do anything wrong. That lady shouldn't have been scared. It's her fault, because they don't like feeling uncomfortable, when instead they could use those uncomfortable feelings to learn and grow from and think, wow, that sucks. I hate feeling this. I'm never going to act that way again, even if I can't undo the past. There's another group of people who says, ew, gross, I hate this feeling. That lady shouldn't have made me feel this way. That lady shouldn't have been scared of me. I never did anything to her.
Yeah, the feeling becomes the problem, not the thing that elicited it.
Exactly.
Yeah, and people, it's in every part of our life. There's no part of our lives that these things don't affect us. And I just think it's incumbent upon the individual. I don't like to use the word work because I don't to do the work. That seems so. I think that's something that people react bad to. I just think that we have to figure out how to make myself better as a human being, and make our community better. I remember I used to run a lot, and there were times when women would cross the street. And again, this is another thing I learned. I used to say, why are they crossing the street? I'm not going to do anything to them. But as I progressed through I just started saying, wow, she has to cross the street. And I never approached them, but it was my thought process that as I'm running down the street and I would see someone cross the street, I never would cross the street and just be an asshole, but it's these thought processes that you go through. And I don't know, I guess that word empathy, which is used so hard, so much, maybe it's overused, but that's the reality. It's a level of empathy that people have to figure out how to tap into, and it's not an easy thing to do.
No, not at all. Not at all. Excellent point.
So I appreciate you
acknowledging
acknowledging your privilege here, Rich, and kind of walking us through that piece of it. I mean, something, power, something, great responsibility, right? Like we do have an obligation to recognize where we are in places of power over others, even if we didn't choose that power, even if we don't want that power. We have an obligation to wield it responsibly and to, ideally deconstruct the forces that granted us that control in the first place.
Yep. And it doesn't matter where you are in society and what level of society you're at. I can't say because I'm a black man, well, I'm not responsible for, what happens to women because I'm set upon all the time. Two different things.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
You have to be able to separate. And even as a woman, there are things that women have to separate. And I don't know what they have to separate. I don't know when they see the power they have. But everyone has power. I don't think anyone doesn't have power.
Sure,
over
right.
someone else.
Yes, situational for sure.
You have to be willing to see it. If you're not willing to see it, if you're always, well, I'm a woman, or I'm a black man, or I'm handicapped, or whatever, so I'm not responsible. That's not true. You are. You are not excused.
Right use of power requires you to
you
recognize the power that you have and to wield it responsibly, but you can't deny that it exists and still responsibly manage it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, a lot of people do that, and I think that's the next step in this iteration of equality, is that the people who are treated unequal to realize that they also have a responsibility and they have a power, and they have to figure out where that power is. And like you said, wield it responsibly. That sounds, but the reality is true.
Mm-hmm.
Even as a parent, anything, it doesn't matter. Big sister, big brother, whatever that power is, you have to figure out how to wield it.
Yeah,
absolutely.
100%. Thank you so much for calling. That was an excellent question.